On the morning of May 7th, 2021, employees at Colonial Pipeline arrived at the company's headquarters in Alpharetta, Georgia, to find a ransom note on their monitors. The note demanded payment in cryptocurrency. Otherwise, the encrypted data would be released, and the company's systems would remain locked. Within hours, Colonial made a decision that affected millions of Americans. They shut down the pipeline that carries 45% of the East Coast's gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, all because someone, somewhere, had reused a password. Colonial Pipeline is not a name most Americans knew before May of 2021. But every time someone on the East Coast filled up a tank, the gasoline almost certainly came through Colonial. The pipeline runs 5,500 miles, from refineries in Texas to terminals in New York Harbor. It moves approximately 100 million gallons of fuel a day. 45% of the fuel consumed on the East Coast of the United States travels through this single pipeline. It is the most important piece of energy infrastructure most people have never heard of. And in the spring of 2021, its security depended in part on one VPN password for an account that was no longer in active use, for an employee who, according to subsequent investigators, may not have even still been with the company. The account had a strong password by complexity standards. What it did not have was multi-factor authentication. Mandiant, the cybersecurity firm Colonial hired to investigate, eventually traced exactly how DarkSide got in. The breach point was a VPN account. The VPN, a virtual private network, was how Colonial Pipeline employees connected to the company's internal systems from remote locations. The account belonged to an employee who, according to public testimony, was no longer believed to be actively using it. Mandiant's chief technical officer, Charles Carmichael, later testified before the U.S. House Committee on Homeland Security. The password, he said, had been a complex one, meeting the company's strict requirements for length, special characters, and case sensitivity. It was not a weak password, but it had been used somewhere else. Specifically, Carmichael testified the same password had been used on a different website at some point in time, a different website that had itself been compromised. When that website's user database leaked, the password ended up on a list. The list, like thousands of others before it, was traded, sold, and eventually purchased by a group like DarkSide. DarkSide tried the password against Colonial's VPN. It worked. The VPN account had a complex password and no multi-factor authentication. The attackers logged in sometime around April 29th, 2021. They stayed inside, undetected, for approximately 8 days before deploying ransomware. By the time Colonial detected the intrusion on May 7th, the attackers had been inside for 8 days. They had exfiltrated approximately 100 gigabytes of corporate data. Then they deployed the ransomware encryption. Colonial's chief executive, Joseph Blount, made the call to shut down the operational pipeline as a precaution, even though the encrypted systems were primarily on the business side. He later testified before Congress that he had no confidence the attackers could not pivot into operational technology if given more time. He could not bill customers without the IT systems. He could not safely operate the pipeline without knowing the full extent of what had been compromised. Within days, gas stations across the East Coast ran dry. Panic buying drained tanks across Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and into the Northeast. The average price of gasoline crossed $3 a gallon for the first time in 7 years. Airlines rerouted flights to refuel elsewhere. The President of the United States declared a state of emergency. On May 8th, Colonial paid the DarkSide ransom, 75 Bitcoin, approximately $4.4 million at the time of payment. DarkSide provided a decryption tool. The tool was so slow that Colonial ended up restoring most systems from backups anyway. 5 weeks after the ransom payment, on June 7th, 2021, the U.S. Department of Justice announced something that had almost never been announced before. The FBI had recovered the ransom, or more precisely, 63.7 Bitcoin of the 75 that Colonial had paid, about $2.3 million in US dollars at the time of recovery, less than the $4.4 million originally paid because the price of Bitcoin had crashed in the interim. Investigators had tracked the cryptocurrency through the blockchain, a public ledger, to a wallet for which the FBI had somehow obtained the private key. The Department of Justice did not disclose exactly how. They executed a seizure warrant, drained the wallet, and returned the funds to Colonial. It was, the FBI said, the first major ransomware ransom they had ever clawed back. It signaled a new doctrine. Ransomware payments could be traced. Some of them could be returned. And it underlines something the cryptocurrency industry has long downplayed. Bitcoin transactions are not anonymous. They are pseudonymous and permanent. They are written into a public ledger that the FBI and a growing industry of blockchain analytics firms are getting steadily better at reading. The Colonial Pipeline attack succeeded because of a chain of small failures, any one of which could have stopped it. Here is how you keep that chain from forming. 1. Every password you have ever used is in a breach somewhere. Check yours at haveibnpwend.com. If your email shows up, the passwords associated with those accounts are on lists that ransomware groups buy. The site is free. It takes 10 seconds. 2. Stop reusing passwords. The Colonial attack worked because 1Password unlocked one account on one VPN. And the password had leaked from a different breach. Use a password manager. 1Password, Bitwarden, Dashlane, and let it generate unique passwords for every account. 3. Multi-factor authentication is not optional. The Colonial VPN account had no MFA. If it had, the attack does not happen, at least not that way. For every account that supports MFA, turn it on. For every account that does not support MFA, ask why you're using it. 4. Audit accounts that should not exist anymore. Dormant accounts of former employees are an open door. Companies need quarterly access reviews. Individuals need to close every old account they no longer use. The dormant Yahoo email from 2009, the abandoned MMO game account, the gym membership you canceled. They all have your old passwords on file. 5. Backups are not optional. Colonial paid the ransom and then restored from backups anyway because the decryption tool was too slow. Backups, tested regularly, kept somewhere ransomware cannot reach, offline, air-gapped, or in immutable cloud storage. That is the actual answer to ransomware. 6. Understand that cryptocurrency is traceable. The DOJ clawback proved it. The marketing of certain cryptocurrencies as untraceable is largely false. Every transaction is on a public ledger forever. The FBI is getting better at reading it every year. 45% of East Coast fuel went offline because of 1Password on one VPN account. The attackers were not state-sponsored. They were a criminal ransomware crew called DarkSide, who would themselves vanish within weeks of the attack, likely because the heat had become too much, not because justice caught up with them. Every breach you read about, every Marriott, every Target, every Equifax, every 23andMe, every loyalty rewards program, every old website you signed up for once and forgot about, feeds the next Colonial. The pipeline was not breached in 2021. It was breached the day a username and password ended up on a list. The breach that takes down your company or empties your accounts has probably already happened. You just have not been searched for yet.